Hello and welcome to the TechBytes audiocast. My name's Tim and I'm from the TechBytes blogazine, and with me is Dr. Roy Shestowitz from the TechBytes website.
It's Friday night and I'm gonna get sauce. I fought the troll and the troll lost. I fought the troll and the troll lost. He tried to boss me and was outbossed. I fought the troll and the troll lost. I fought the troll and the troll lost. Underneath his creeper bridge, hoping goats will cross. Quoting Ashcroft and Tom Ridge, I fought the troll and the troll.
Hello and welcome to the TechBytes audiocast, episode 20 for Saturday, December the 18th. Well, tonight's me and Roy again, and we're going to be covering a few pieces of news that we didn't get round to yesterday, and having a bit of a discussion as well on our usual topics of choice, Microsoft, Linux, free software. So without further ado, we'll go over to Roy, who I hope has got a first title for tonight. And Roy, microphone's yours.
Yeah, well, I spent the past 2 days, as well as other people who are concerned with free software, especially in Europe, talking about what's called the EIF version 2, and that's the European Interoperability Framework version 2. It's to do with the policies, especially the public policies, public sector policies for procurement of technology, mostly software, but also other things to serve the public in a way that's allowing people to interact with one another using certain formats, and also specifying what kind of programs they can use to exchange data to communicate with their representatives in the public sector in general. And that's been a pretty major issue for anyone who's here in Europe, because Microsoft and companies like SAP were trying to ensure that software patents are not only being legitimized by a document such as this one, but also actually find their way into the document for the purpose of shutting out all kinds of programs, like certain browsers or certain documents that are accessible or easier to edit using certain word processors. So I could probably go further. I could probably discuss the details a bit more, but one of the things which aren't conclusive at this stage is whether it's good news for free open source software or not, because some people interpret the document as being very good news, and other people, for example, Glenn Moody, who's a journalist in this area and a person who's been very active in this whole process, he declares it to be a huge loss to the lobbyists of the big companies and corporations, mostly notably lobbyists of Microsoft and also the so-called Microsoft of Europe, which is SAP. So that's been a pretty major issue for anyone who's concerned with the policy side of things, as opposed to a release of software. Also, the WikiLeaks story, the WikiLeaks storm, has kind of you probably know Julian Assange has been released, and I think quite a few people feel some relief. And also, since we have over 2,000 years of the site now, people aren't quite concerned about the site going away, which was probably a concern just under 2 weeks ago, when the war actually attempts to put down the site and denial of service attacks against the WikiLeaks sites, the various sites which were hosting the various location sites, as in separate location, geographic locations of the data, including attempts by France, for example, to ban the publication of the cables, which I think should be publicly accessible anyway, because they're this is not a private company. This is actually the set of documents written and paid for by the public and by the publicly elected officials. So I think we could cover today, and we agreed what we should cover, and I spoke to a few people who are normally listening to the show. We want to talk about lobbyists in general. We want to talk about people who try to hackle their way into manipulating people into thinking and behaving in certain ways, which are extremely harmful, I think, to software freedom. And I don't say open source, but I'm talking about more broadly the goal of trying to ensure we have this liberation, that we have this independence when we deal with software. Increasingly, something what we realize when we look at the hacker culture in sites like WikiLeaks and how they have to be relying on decentralized frameworks and decentralized systems to ensure they can disseminate the message without being interrupted and interfered by public officials, by governments, by big companies that have lots of interest, and especially, as Julian Assange put it 2 days ago, or I think yesterday or 2 days ago, he was released in the afternoon. He spoke about the attacks on him actually not coming from governments, but in his words, it was actually big banks that did that and were using the instruments of the governments to try to shut down the free speech rights of WikiLeaks, which is about to, by the way, publish some leaks about a big bank. So probably will be a big storm again.
The whole story is fascinating. I don't mean that in any derogatory way to Mr. Assange and his plight at the moment and difficulties that he's having, but in having the story about WikiLeaks and the material that they have been leaking to the public, it's almost created its own story in itself. Obviously, when the site's been attacked and people had various hosting difficulties or whatever, and I think it's an absolutely fascinating story which is going to play out for years in respect of the other stories that it generates from itself. I've only looked at the WikiLeaks from the periphery, mainstream press and a couple of trusted blogs that I read regularly. But I mean, there's certainly a lot more to come if what I'm reading is correct, and it's certainly a very fascinating story. I think nobody can be sure categorically what has caused the problems that who's been against WikiLeaks and who's been against, if anybody is against Mr. Assange, and I don't think we can say for definite. I think a sense of perspective. I remember a lot of blogs originally when the WikiLeaks this story first broke, they were blaming the US government. There's all sorts of finger pointing, and I think at the moment certainly nobody can be sure who or what is to blame or for what purpose. I tend to be very sceptical when I hear a finger of blame, and I'm sure you do, Roy, as well. When a finger of blame is pointed until we've actually let the dust settle a bit and see what happens a few months down the line. But yeah, very fascinating story. Sorry, Roy, I'll let you continue on with anything else you want to add.
Here to cover this whole story, and I've been writing quite a bit about it because I think this is a very good advocacy example or a case study why we need software freedom in the first place, and why we need to ensure we have net neutrality, we don't have censorship, we don't have the issue of having to ask permission from a company to host our data in a so-called data center or so-called cloud, and why we also need to ensure we control our software so we can encrypt data and pass data around, and also make mirrors very quickly, set up servers in a way which allows us to disseminate the information in such a way that the supposedly little people, put it in quotes, will have some power over the code that they use, and don't rely always on corporations allowing them to have access to certain tools to do certain tasks. And this actually solidifies the vision of Richard Stallman back in the 80s. And he wrote an article in The Guardian 2 days ago or 1 day ago, explaining that WikiLeaks is about people rebelling against control, where control refers to power or people in power. And he explains how the Amazon situation also is a case of people trying to express their point of view when it comes to the denial of service attacks, which, by the way, isn't a zombie attack. And I saw the Free Software Foundation issuing a post today written by Peter Brown. He was explaining this is not a zombie or botnet attack, because people were using their own personal computers to launch the attack, basically to request lots of certain types of packets and basically putting the system down with their own system. So not actually using somebody else's machine, but it's more of a way of jamming the network, which I'm personally against. I just don't think it's a good way of even trying to represent